Pranay, and I'm an assistant professor of political science in Amity University. And I'm going to be introducing international relations and the future prospects if the student undertakes international relations in higher education. To put it in the least amount of words, fundamentally, the relations between two or more nations are categorized as international relations. The corresponding conflict and cooperation that occurs when two or more nations interact is what lies under international relations. It must be mentioned here that about 10 years ago, about a decade ago, various examinations for civil services, maybe central civil services or federal ones, the portion of international relations in the exams used to be a mere 5% to 10%. If you now pick up any question paper, you will see that any examination at the very least is asking 50 to 60% questions from international relations every year. So it comes in very handy for any student of political science or international relations particularly. If they take to the subject, it will be lucrative if they intend to become civil servants to take the subject. Then governments have to interact with other governments, other nations have to interact with other nations, and therefore educated and expert personnel are required. You can become a geostrategic analyst, where your expertise in a particular area, if you do area specialization, you will be called on by the government when government talks to other nations. For example, when India and China interact because of the Iran issue or any other issue or trade issue, people who will be researching in that particular area are invited year-on-year basis for the expertise advice. And then the international law, because international law is itself a different field, people who participate in law, in international law, must have a sound understanding of international relations. Then there are multinational corporations like Amnesty International, Red Cross Society, Doctors Sans Frontiers International, SOS, Observer Research Foundation based in the national capital Delhi itself, World Vision, of course, Max Securities. All of these are geostrategic think tanks who want to engage more than one nation on a number of issues for trade. In particular, WTO is a rather active organization, and every world body, every organization must go through WTO if they want to enhance trade. And then the world is blossoming, is booming with international organizations year-on-year basis. Ever since the United Nations, with all its limitations, we still consider it to be a success because the Third World War has still not happened, and that's its primary objective. Even though the proxy war was in a limited arena, a Third World War, the global stage has yet to happen, and that's why we say United Nations is worth all the money it is. So United Nations has its own civil services. Every year on year they bring out forms and vacancies. You can apply for that. If you must work in United Nations, you need to know any one of the international languages, that is Spanish, German, or French, and you can apply for the civil service post, and you have to work abroad. That is the thing. And there are non-profit organizations like the ones I mentioned earlier. If one needs to undertake international relations, particularly the list is right in front of you. Jawaharlal Nehru is very prestigious. University of Mumbai, Amity University, of course. University of Madras, Jamia Delhi is very famous. Career Point in Rajasthan, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Greetings everyone. Welcome to Season 2 of the Martiniere Career Fair. Today with us, we have an eminent personality in the field of international relations, who will help us understand the different facets and IR entails. Today we have Mr. Prakash Gupta, who qualified for the civil services in 2002 after completing his masters in English literature with gold medal. He opted for Indian Foreign Service as first preference. Mr. Gupta has held many prestigious positions in the Government of India. He has served in the Ministry of External Affairs, New Delhi 2002 to 2004, Indian Embassy in Beijing 2004 to 2006, Indian Consulate in Shanghai 2006 to 2009, Ministry of External Affairs as Press Officer for Ministry of External Affairs, handling media relations and visits of media delegation for Prime Minister's visits abroad 2009 to 2011. Currently, Mr. Prakash Gupta is the Joint Secretary, UN Political, Ministry of External Affairs. We are very sure that you're going to learn about how much importance does a career such as international relations holds in today's day and age.
My question to you, sir, is could you elaborate on what international relations or diplomacy mean to you and what duties does this career entail?
So international relations or diplomacy to me or to an Indian person should be essentially about safeguarding India's national interests in the international platform. You do it through two means. One is through investing in bilateral relationships with strategic partners, neighborhood, and countries where you are based in. And the other is through preserving your national interests at multilateral platforms, which is like the United Nations, the WHO, the UNICEF, or the National Security Council, or through the UN Security Council, of which India is presently a member. Now, presently, I happen to head the division which looks after UN political matters in the Foreign Office. And therefore, I look after everything that has to do with the United Nations General Assembly and also the United Nations Security Council. So in terms of meaning to me or to us, it is very important that we first know what India's interests are, either in our own South Asian region or in Asia or in the larger world order when it comes to issues like climate change, counterterrorism, nuclear proliferation, or any other, even including the ongoing Ukrainian conflict. So we have to take positions. We need to know what we want, what is good in India's interests, and then make sure that we have the largest buy-in from other like-minded countries towards our line of thinking. So that's what we aim to do ourselves. With regards to what should one be looking for, if that's what was the second part of your question in terms of IR. Look, international relations is a very specialized field. It's only when you graduate or you postgraduate can you look at doing specialization in IR. And IR has both parts to it. There is a theoretical part of IR, which deals with the various kinds of theories in play. And then there is a practical part to IR, which deals with how should nations respond given a set of specific challenges that are posed to them. So if people have interest in diplomacy or even in strategic thinking or in being part of IR think tanks, then they need to develop some kind of basic specialization in IR, as it would hold them in good stead in the longer run.
Thank you, sir, for that answer. Now I'd like to ask you, moving on to building a career in international relations, what subjects and courses does one need to opt for, and what special advice would you give to scholars who aspire to build a career in international relations?
Look, this could be looked at two levels. One is till your class 12th, and then is the period beyond class 12th. So till class 12th, you have very little options but to hope to develop interest, because you don't have in any of either ICSE, CBSE or whatever stream you may be, IR as an exclusive subject, at least not to the best of my knowledge. You may have it now, at least it didn't used to be in our days. So my suggestion would be you should take interest in general studies, general affairs, current contemporary issues, and you should be well versed in history, political science, civics, understanding of your constitution, those kinds of subjects, which come mostly, I think, till class 10th in social studies. Until class 12, you can specialize further. Once you do class 12 and you are actually looking for a field, a specialization or a career in international relations, you could have a two-way approach. If you're looking to join the Indian Foreign Service, then the only option is the civil services, which is the UPSC, which is a very specialized stream of preparation. The other is if you're looking at options in the IR field otherwise, which is if you want to say be a diplomat for the UN, or if you want to work for the UN system, if you want to join a good reputed international think tank like the Carnegie Foundation or the ORF or the Indian Defense Strategic Analysis Institute, this would require a high level of subject specialization. So you should opt for subjects that have to do with strategic studies, that have to do with specific streams of IR school and IR thoughts, subjects related to defense, political and security matters. It's that kind of specialization in your graduation, post-graduation, or even PhD that would give you the necessary skill set that is looked after or sought after by think tanks, UN organizations, or other organizations based in Geneva or New York. So that's how I would suggest you to look at it. If you say look at options like political science or history, or if IR is available in the graduation wherever you are, then you should go for it, as that would hold you in good stead both in the civil services perspective as well as from the IR profession perspective.
Thank you so much, sir, for that answer. That has the introduction of Model United Nations as an activity for school students proven to be beneficial for improving the international relations related information within the youth? And sir, do you believe that it will somehow nurture better leaders in the future?
Thank you for that. Again, I'd like to answer this at two levels. One is, how does it benefit a student who wants to be interested in international relations, its engagement vis-a-vis the engagement with the Model UN? Look, for every student across the globe, at the end of the day, whatever you will do, whether it is government, non-government, you need to have a basic understanding of what your country stands for when it comes to international issues. Unless you engage in UN, which is the highest platform of all nations coming together, you will be not having an understanding of what your national position is on issues at the United Nations. So from that perspective, it is very important that you all develop some basic understanding of India's position on issues like climate change, counterterrorism, nuclear proliferation. These days, we have also other thematic issues going like the ongoing war or the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, or issues to do with the energy, food and security, the food insecurity issues across the globe. So that helps you develop a better understanding. Second perspective is, look, not just knowing India's position, engaging at the UN through Model UN, etc., also helps you develop a better understanding of how other countries have a perspective on these issues. Because it's good to know your own take, but it's also good to know where the argument from the other side is coming from. So if you were to deliberate in the Model UN system, say on what should be the final resolution to the Ukrainian conflict as a student group, you will see various strands of thought coming from a Russian perspective, from a Ukrainian perspective, and from a global South perspective. And therefore, it not just only strengthens your reasoning, your outlook, but it also gives you a better, wide understanding of how global issues are discussed. So I would certainly encourage each and every student, as it would be professionally enriching for you in case you were to get involved in some strands of IR later on in your career. So to certainly consider participating in the module. It's a good activity.
Thank you so much, sir, for that answer.
So moving on, people more often than not associate international relations with job like that of the embassy staff or ambassadors. We would be keen to know about the other job opportunities within the sector and what is their work and life like.
So international relations need not just be associated with Indian embassies or Indian high commissions outside. I would say that is just 10% of the diversity that IR has to offer. Obviously, I would say that the greatest job satisfaction does come from representing India abroad as an Indian ambassador or an Indian high commissioner. As India's permanent representative or ambassadors to the United Nations, you speak for India at the highest multilateral platform. That is perhaps the greatest joy and pride that somebody could aspire for if one is opting for a government service in IR. But other than being a diplomat, there are other options as well which open up in the field of IR, which I would suggest is, look, these days there are quite a few fields opening up in the stream of IR. For example, climate change is one issue which is a cross-cutting theme across the globe. So if students, scholars tend to specialize in, say, climate change, they can be part of global green initiatives, think tanks who engage in the COP, which is the Conference of Parties on the Climate Change Negotiations. Because there is also a very wide multi-stakeholder engagement happening on the climate change processes that is essentially a non-government space. And in the non-government space, it is think tanks, civil society, media, and other stakeholders that bring in a very essential perspective, which may be a non-government perspective, but very important and influential in shaping international voices and opinion. So everything other than, say, a government vocation in diplomacy, which is outside that, would fall into this domain. The third factor, which would be looking at options, which I said earlier, would be the international civil servants domain, wherein other than IR think tanks, you could look for professions which are part of multilateral organizations. So you could work for the WHO, you could work for the UN, you could work for the UNICEF, you could work for UN Women. So there are also these international organizations where your skill set in IR would hold you in good stead as a international civil servant across various global geographies. You should be willing to adapt yourself to different cultures if you are going in for any of these professions, because you need not necessarily be based in India. You may have to move from Cuba to Argentina to South Korea to somewhere, and that adjustment every 2 years or every 3 years across cultures is not an easy adjustment. So that's something you need to be mentally prepared for.
Perfect, sir. Thank you so much for that answer. So whenever we talk about international relations as a career path, we only focus on eminent personalities, especially Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Is it so because India does not have a great stake in the international bodies, or is it just a misconception which the youth has before it?
The misperception that you asked me about. Look, at the end of the day, this misnomer perception of Dr. Shashi Tharoor representing all and be all of international relations may not be correct. Why is he well known and popular also has to do with his presence on social media, how he has been able to project himself, how people have been able to perceive him, and essentially the skill set that he carries. But it is not that it's only Dr. Shashi Tharoor who represents everything from India in the IR space. And I'd like you to be fully appreciative of all that people have done before or after Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Now, Dr. Shashi Tharoor was a UN diplomat, which I told you is the third option. He used to work for the United Nations system and rose to the ranks of being an Under-Secretary General in charge of communications. Subsequently, he gave it up and joined politics and became a member of the parliament for the Congress party. So what he does today essentially has got nothing to do with IR, but as a professional parliamentarian representing the interests of his party and what he feels is good for his constituency. Now, if you look at other names in the field of IR, you would have heard great names like Henry Kissinger. From India itself, you might have heard names of Dr. S. Jaishankar, who is our External Affairs Minister. You might have heard names of former Indian diplomats who might have made it to great political positions, including Mr. Natwar Singh, who used to be India's External Affairs Minister at one point of time. You might have heard names of Mr. Shiv Shankar Menon, who was India's National Security Advisor. You might have heard name of Mr. Brijesh Mishra, who was also a diplomat and India's National Security Advisor. So it is a different ball game altogether whether you get to register yourself in the popular public perception as an IR specialist or not. The role of diplomats and diplomacy essentially is behind the screen. It is making sure that you achieve your country's interests in a manner which is largely beyond the cameras and beyond the public space. And therefore, some of the greatest or most well-known scholars of IR may not have been as popular public figures as Dr. Shashi Tharoor may have been, but they have certainly contributed a lot in terms of securing India's interest in the IR space.
Thank you, sir, for that answer. And one more question that I'd like to ask you is that we have mostly seen the work of international relations in movies, while their actual work in reality remains ambiguous for the most part. So could you please take us through the day-to-day life of an international relations personnel, and what are some other major perks in this field?
Again, as I said, you will have to segregate the life of an IR personnel from two distinct professions. One is as a diplomat and the other is from a think tank space. So I'll answer the first one. Look, for any person in a day-to-day life, it has to begin at 9:30 a.m. in the office and end at whatever hours in the evening when you are able to finish your desk for the day. Diplomats essentially say if you are posted out, say at the Indian mission to the United Nations in New York, first thing you will go to your office, check your messages and look at the meetings for the day. You may have to go deliver statements in the UN on behalf of India at certain points in the day. So you would need to prepare those statements. You would need to take approval from your headquarters for those statements. You would need to get a fuller understanding of the subject and make sure that are you articulating India's best case. Other than that, it's a very important aspect of diplomacy is your interpersonal skill set. So you need to engage with people. It is not just that you speaking in the UN or you speaking at a public platform will get your objectives done. You need other people also sometimes to speak for your case. And therefore, you need in your daily schedule a time slot where you can host people, dine them out, take them out, cultivate them, to influence them so that they can understand your perspective better. So that's the second part of the day, which is engaging, hosting people, entertaining them. The third part of the day is also what I call as, look, if you have to be a good diplomat in any country, you need to understand its people, understand its language, and understand its culture. So a third part in the day, obviously, is also geared towards looking at what its local culture is, what its local shows are, what local people do, what local people eat, what they enjoy doing. And as a diplomat, you get to be posted across the global landscape from maybe Indonesia, China, Jakarta, whatever, country to country. And you need to learn to pick up their local nuances to increase your own efficiency. So that's also a very important component of the day. Now coming to the second option, which is what do say IR thinkers or IR professionals would do who are non-diplomats. From their perspective, a typical day would be making sure that you are preparing your ideas or your research paper after having analyzed all that is out in the global domain on that particular theme. So making sure that you have access to some of the best research data available is very key. Going through them, analyzing it, discussing it with your counterparts, and then seeing how government opinion is on those issues is also a very key factor that one needs to consider. So I would say of a 24-hour day, and if it's an 18-hour working cycle for you, it would be 30% research and preparation, 30% engagement with other stakeholders, and 30% in terms of how you yourself play it on the international space, and 10% of enjoyment as you would like to cull that out.
Thank you so much, sir, for that answer. My final question to you today, sir, is there any piece of advice which you would like to share with the youth which would be listening to this episode of the Martiniere Career Fair?
Look, I am presuming that this would be listened to by students of Martiniere School mostly, who are trying to plan their career options. And from that perspective, I would suggest, look, at your school college phase, please focus as much as you can in making sure that you develop an interest in the subjects that you are studying. The key thing is developing an interest and making sure that that distinction between that may or may not translate into 99% in terms of marks, but your interest in that subject should stay alive. And when you study subjects, you should look at perspectives that are just way beyond the book, the textual content that offers you. You should look at its practical applications as to how it would interface with you in your daily lifestyle. And if you want to make sure that you are aspiring to make a career in IR or diplomacy, as I said, articulation, patience, and the art of negotiation are three very critical key skill sets. Whenever you get an opportunity to own these kinds of skill sets in your school days through extracurricular activities, including through activities like participating in the Model United Nations, do participate and make the best of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. With this, we come to the end of this episode of Martiniere Career Fair Season 2. Thank you so much for being a part of it, and thank you so much, sir, for so graciously agreeing to being a part of